Hey, this is PJ with CLK Supplies, and I have my dad, Pete Slauson, back with me. Dad, thanks for coming back on.
Yep, no problem.
No, it's early in the morning, so thanks for coming in so early.
Anything for you, son.
Yeah. So, in some previous conversations, I've went over, what it's like as a mobile locksmith and buying a locksmithing business, and I really wanted to bring my dad on and kind of have him talk through the process of when he went from being just a mobile-only locksmith to starting to add retail storefronts. And I wanted to have him kind of talk about the ins and outs of that, kind of went into it, some of the successes as well as some of the failures. So, Dad, what year did you start locksmithing?
1980.
1980, okay. And at what time did you decide you wanted to get your own first, locksmithing store?
About 2 years into it.
About 2 years. Now, throughout those 2 years, was that something like when you started that you were like, hey, I know eventually at one point I want to get a locksmithing, like a storefront? Or
Yes.
is that something that developed?
No, I always wanted one.
Okay. And what was that like? So when you got your first locksmithing store, did you hire some people to run it right away? Or did you try to run it while you were still doing work out in the field? Like, how did you do that?
Well, it was a small store, and when it was just me running it.
Okay.
When I got a call, I put a sign, be back at, an hour, 20 minutes, 2 hours, whatever.
Okay.
Because at first you can't afford employees by any means.
Okay.
You have to build it up.
So you would just kind of so you pretty much got a place to go between jobs type of thing?
Yes.
But that probably put in some long hours though, probably because you wanted to keep it open, so you're trying to maybe work earlier in the morning, later at night, or?
Well, I opened at 8, closed at 6.
Okay. Interesting. So how many years did you do that before you hired your first employee?
Oh, well, I hired one employee about 3 years into it, part-time.
3 years, like since you had started?
Right.
Okay, so about a year after.
Yes,
you were kind of doing the both, because I think that's still kind of common today, right? Like we know locksmiths who still, do service work, and then like they just try to keep shop hours a couple hours in the morning type of thing.
Right.
So you had your lock store for about a year. You decided to hire someone part-time. How was it going through and like trying to train them to make sure they took care of the customers the same way you did and try to keep them on point when you're out in the field, trusting them to be running the
Well, it
operations
takes time and effort. I mean, everybody screws up, including me, when you first are getting into it. You just got to teach them and try to answer their questions for them to explain to the customer what, no, this is what you want, or this is what it costs.
Okay. Now, a few years after that, right, you decided to move from California up here to northern Idaho.
Right.
And when you did that, you closed your locksmithing?
No, I sold it.
You sold it down there?
Took half of the stuff.
Okay.
Moved up here.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't know this, so it's kind of fun learning right now.
Yeah, well, you were 6 months old when we moved here.
Yeah. So you came up here. You decided, you wanted to keep locksmithing, so you opened up, a new business with the same name.
Right.
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 And then were you just mobile locksmithing at first, or were you also, did you get a lock shop right away?
We already leased a lock shop.
Okay. And do you still have a picture of that?
Somewhere.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll have to get it popped up so they can see what
Yep, small little store.
Yep. So you started doing that, and you had your lock shop, your one lock shop, and you decided to, you were out in the field most of the time, or were you in the shop?
No, I was out in the field most of the time.
Okay.
I like still being out in the field.
Yeah, now you like doing that work out there.
Right.
So at what point, I think at that point you started to build your business, right? You started to, get busier and busier.
Door to door. Hand out my cards.
Handing out your cards. And at what point did you decide that you wanted to open another one?
Well, first I was renting, and then I found a piece of property and built the first store.
Okay.
And then after that, I thought I was in seven heaven, because, wow, I actually got a store. But I'm paying me, not anybody else.
Yeah.
Because landlords can jack the rent up just because they want to. So the unfortunate part. And then it was going, I had an employee, and I go, oh, might as well try to open up another one over here in Post Falls.
Yeah.
And I rented a spot in the back of a pawn shop of all places. It had its own entrance, but nobody would use me because it was a pawn shop. They think you're shady.
Yeah.
And that wasn't it at all, so I closed it.
It was just kind of awkward. I
Yes.
guess would be a good word.
Right. And then I went back, then I was looking for property and I found a piece, and so I built one about 4 years later.
Okay. And how was it going from having one store to worry about to having another store to worry about? At the same time, you're trying to make sure that at that point you had more than just you out in the field, right? Trying to make sure all the work was getting done the way you wanted it to. Was that like a learning curve?
Oh yeah, it's always a learning curve, finding the right people to trust and do a good job for you, because it's your name out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when someone walks into one of your shops and has a bad experience,
believe me, I hear about it eventually.
It unfortunately kind of reflects back.
Right.
To you to some degree.
Right.
Right.
And
especially if it's one of your friends or someone.
Right. Absolutely, because I expect everybody to serve the customer with
integrity.
That's it.
Yep. There
Thank
we go.
you. Integrity and be polite. No matter, some customers can be a pain, but you still got to be polite and courteous to them.
Mm-hmm. So now you have your 2 stores, right? You're operating those, and things are going well. Then you decide to expand again, right?
Yes.
Now this time you decided to go up north. About how far was that? So the 2 shops that you have at this point, how far apart are they?
About 10 miles.
About 10 miles.
Right.
So it's a quick drive. A problem goes on, something happens.
Right.
Doesn't take you long to get there.
Right.
Now, the next store you decided to open, how long of a drive was that?
45 minutes. It was about 40 miles away.
About 40 miles away. Okay, so at this point you decided...
And I bought an existing store.
You bought an existing one.
Right.
So were they retiring?
They were moving back to California.
Okay. So they're moving back to California. You decided to buy it.
Right.
And did you take over the existing people that worked there?
He had nobody. It was just him.
It was just him.
Right.
Okay, so you went ahead and you hired someone, 1 or 2 people?
Yes.
Up there, okay. And how did that, did that start off well? It
went real well at first. And then it was Sandpoint. And it is a ski, during winter skiing, during summer, a lot of lakes and rivers they want to go kayaking.
Mm-hmm.
And the employees I had at that time, they all want to go, I'm not coming into work because I'm going to go snowboarding. And I go, wait a sec, we got to get the store open. So eventually I couldn't find good enough employees to keep it running, so I sold it.
Okay, yep, so that one, you felt like you tried, you did almost everything you could, but...
For 5 years.
For 5 years.
Right.
And how many times would you have to send up someone from your other lock stores up there? Was that a common theme, or how?
Unfortunately, yes, because they wouldn't show up. So I got to keep the store open, so I sent one of the guys down here to open the store and do the jobs that day.
And you're essentially driving you're paying 2 hours worth of drive time
right.
just to open the front door.
Exactly.
And so at some point you decided, you know what, this distance, it's kind of too much.
Yes.
Just the situation's not working out well, and so I'm gonna sell.
Yes.
Right. So you decided to do that, and you were successful in doing that.
Right.
And then you just went back down to your 2 stores.
Yes.
Right. How many years later did you decide, was it, to start to try another one?
Well, I guess I like punishment sometimes. I started a store up in Kellogg, which is about 45 miles away.
So about the same distance away, but in a different direction.
Yes.
Okay. And so you decided to now you bought a storefront up there from the beginning, right?
Yes, from the beginning.
So you bought a storefront up there. You got it open, and how did that go?
At first it went fantastic. I mean, you got some good guys. It was a guy and a gal, and they worked great together. And, you know, you get your slow times, so you want to make sure everything's kept up looking good inside and out. And, you know, I did it for 3 years, and then my main guy up there was going to quit. And I wasn't making a ton of money. I was making some, but not enough to really keep it open. So I decided to rent the building, closed it.
So you just closed it down. Now,
Right.
did you try to sell it, or you just
No,
want?
not at that time.
Okay, so you didn't try to really sell it. Okay, so you decided to just close it down and you rented the
Right.
building.
Right.
Now, how was that like going through? You know, like you had 2 stores you opened, were successful, still running to this day.
Right.
You tried another one kind of further away, didn't really work out, and so you decided just to sell it.
Right.
But this one you decided to close. Like, was that a tough decision?
Well, it's a ski place. You know, really during winter was their busy season.
Mm-hmm.
And
So both places were ski towns,
right.
essentially. Yeah.
And they were very small towns, so a mobile guy would have been doing better because he wasn't paying out rent and
Sure.
stuff.
But how was that decision like to close it? You know,
Oh,
I mean,
it's a
like,
big decision,
you know, I mean,
because-
there's a lot of pride that comes into the fact that, you know, I mean, you've worked and built these other locations,
Right.
and then you try one, and it just doesn't. It's not worth to keep
Right.
going.
I went up there for a year every day. I drove that every day
Okay.
to make sure everything was being done correctly and answering the customers' questions. In the locksmithing industry, a lot of people get nervous when they see a new lock or a new product and they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So they go, "Oh, we don't do those." And yes, we do.
Yeah. Just because they haven't like maybe necessarily seen it or have know how to take it apart,
Right.
they're just kind of pushing people out the door,
Exactly.
and you're still paying
Paying them.
payroll.
Right.
Right. So you decided just to close it down. I mean, but was that a hard decision? Like, was that like a
absolutely.
sleepless night type of thing where you're like, man, like, do I really want to just stop the bleeding? You know, just make it stop now, or should I keep trying? Or at
That's
that
about
point,
it. Was bleeding, you
Yeah.
know, and I figured it. You know, it's a big decision to close something or open something, but you got to make decisions. You know, if you don't try, you haven't failed. If you try and fail, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if you don't try, you've already failed.
Sure. So you're essentially saying that like you felt like you kind of did everything you could to try to make it work.
Yes.
And you just got to the point where it's like the personal cost to keep it going and the wear and tear emotionally as well as physically just got to a spot where it's like, you know, it's just better for my business to close it.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now
Then I rented the building.
Yep.
For a bunch of years, and then guess what? 10 or 15 years later, I open it again.
You know, like I think it was like was it like deep down like one of those losses that you're like, you know what? Like,
I know we can
like,
salvage it.
Yes, you know, I'm not letting this thing go yet.
Right.
And say, okay, so you open it back up.
Did
Tell us about it.
fantastic again.
Okay.
Did great. But then, you know, guys want to move out of this area what we're working, and they were good employees. And I try to pay them more, anything I could to keep them so we could keep it open. And we survived 5 years. And then I closed it again once and for all. Sold the real estate. I am out of there.
So you decided.
I failed.
Well,
But
I
I
mean,
tried.
Yeah, you tried, but it was one of those things that, like, you know, you still own the real estate. You had been renting it, leasing it out,
Right.
in between there. But you know, things were going well in your company, and you're like, you know, that area had grown
Oh, quite a bit.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you decided to, you know, you're like, you know what, I'm not done yet. I'm going to try it one more time.
Yep. And guess who told me I was nuts? PJ. And now I agree with him.
Yeah, I mean, we can save that conversation for another day.
Okay.
But, you know, I think it's, I guess from my perspective, it's just like with the distance and such a small community, you know, they just have their own ways of kind of doing things. And
Absolutely.
And to get your guy to your guys to always want to work all the time the way your business does.
Right.
It was just hard, really.
Yeah.
You know, it was just hard to get someone to want to do that.
In those small towns.
In the small towns
Right.
like that, yeah. So you decided to close it once for all. You even sold the real estate so you couldn't do it again.
Yep.
Right?
I'm done.
You're done. So here we are. Now this is just a few years ago.
Right.
You then decide to buy another locksmithing shop kind of between your two
Right.
locksmithing shops
In Coeur d'Alene.
in Coeur d'Alene.
Existing.
Existing.
Right.
How has that been?
Oh, that, he's was around forever, longer than I, and he had a good business, and so he wanted to retire, and I found it in a national magazine for sale, so I called the realtor and said, hey, and so we negotiated and we bought it, and then
How's that one? How has it been?
been great. It's worked out very well,
Okay.
making money,
Sure.
and that's the key of being, in business. Pay your people and
Absolutely. So,
increase sales.
yep. Well, yeah, well, thanks for taking the time to kind of share with everybody the wins and the losses,
Right.
throughout the process. And so, I guess kind of in closing, the question I really...
Pros and cons of having a store and not a store.
Yeah. So through everything that you've been through,
Right.
are you happy that you have the locksmithing, like the retail locksmithing stores?
Yes.
Like, would you do it again if you had to start over today?
Yes. Because what I learned when I was a mobile locksmith, you'd get a call and then you sit there and wait for another one.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't always work, But I had comments from customers, well, how do I know you're coming back if I have a problem, or how can I get a hold of you if there's a problem? Let's say something failed,
Okay.
and well, I can't come to you, you got to come to me.
Okay.
I don't want them coming to my house.
Sure.
So I decided to open a retail store because it would be, people could come to me knowing that we're going to be there tomorrow.
Okay, so you're saying by having that retail store, you think it's kind of giving you some opportunities with some customers,
Oh, absolutely.
That-
Big jobs.
big jobs that you don't think you might have received if
Right.
you didn't have that retail storefront, because there's some sort of security aspect to a customer's mentality that it's like, hey, if I have a problem or need something, I feel more secure because there's a retail store I can go to
Yes.
if I have a problem.
Plus, you have all your stuff in the store, what you're selling. You're not just offering the services, what you're doing out of your truck. You're offering those plus merchandise. I mean, you can be very profitable selling key rings and stuff.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
They come in because everybody wants to do it themselves, so they can come in and buy locks instead of going to Home Depot or Lowe's. They come in to you. Might be a little bit more, but they know that's all you do.
Sure.
The other places do multiple things. All they are is a merchandiser,
Yeah.
where we have the knowledge of where the problem is in the locks and stuff.
Sure. Okay, well, awesome. Well, yeah, I think that kind of sums it up. And once again, thanks for coming on here. And,
Yeah, no problem.
telling the world here about your adventures and opening and.
It's been a ride, but I sure enjoy it. I do. I'm always looking to expand. I can't help myself, always.
So, are you saying that there might be even more expansion in the future?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
I'm old, but if I retire, what else am I going to do? Play with my cows?
Yeah. Well, great, Dad. Well, thanks for coming on. Everyone, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. No, but
Need another chair, are you going to sit on that?
I'm going to sit on that.
Hey, y'all! Oh, I can see my little picture up there.
Oh, yeah. You
I'm going
ready?
to swallow my gum.
Want to spit it out? Swallow it? I thought they said that's
Waste
bad
that
for you.
5 cents? What the heck?
I thought that was
Get some nutrition.
bad for you to swallow gum.
I don't know.
You ready?
Sure. What are you laughing about?
Oh, that's what I do sometimes, you know.
Oh yeah. Got to talk to your dad. Seriously.